Alrighty, my goodness, I'm a bit nervous, man. There's Dan Shiffman in my computer, and it's a little bit different because normally when I see Dan Shiffman, he's in a YouTube video explaining things. Now I can speak to him, which is amazing. Dan,
I
welcome.
still am in a rectangular box, so that's the usual format. Sometimes people see me and they're like, "Oh, you look at your legs."
I saw a meme that somebody was saying like it could be that Dan Shiffman has like a horse legs and nobody knows it because it's always cut off here. So that was so funny. Great, Dan. Awesome that we can do this. It's really exciting. I was looking forward for this since a quite long time. I really wanted to connect more with the people from the Processing Foundation and closer to the whole ecosystem of processing. It happened first when I interviewed Casey for Processing Community Day, which I organized myself 2 years ago. And now I have you, which is fantastic, amazing. Thank you so much for joining.
It's a thrill to be here. I've been following your work. I know we do a lot of similar things coming from different angles and going into different places, but there's a lot to chat about. So
yeah,
thanks for having me.
Awesome. Thank you. Great. Okay, well, how is it going for you? You are in NYU now, and maybe you had a very tight teaching day today, or?
Yeah, well, it's the morning here, so and my classes are Wednesday and Thursday, so I'm a little bit I'm fresh, but yes, I'm sitting here at NYU. I'm in Brooklyn. There's a campus. NYU has a campus in Brooklyn. There's a building called at 370 J Street that is the old Mass Transit Authority office building that NYU took over, and we still call it MTA, but now it's called Media Technology Art, perhaps.
Wow, that's
and
cool.
So yeah, this is we don't have private offices here, but we have all these little rooms that people can do calls in or meet for office hours. So I just staked one out, and you can kind of see some studio space back there. And I don't know what these strange sculptures are here. I cleverly positioned a copy of my book here as like subtle product placement. Maybe it'll subliminally go into everybody's brains as they're watching or listening to this.
It was hidden by your beautiful shirt, so I didn't see it. That's amazing. Let's talk about the book. So it's out now, The Nature of Code P5JS edition, as far as I understood it. And I mean, I know your book since I think maybe even 8 years or something. It was something that I used a lot in my learning, even though at some point I just felt like, okay, maybe this is a little bit too advanced for my students, because I think we talked about this in the preparation for this call. I tried to keep everything because I mostly teach very visually oriented graphic design students, like mostly very, very basics. And I just decided to stay under this radar, let's say under this threshold of object-oriented programming. It now changes a bit. I start to think about like, how could I make this interesting for this target group? But well, tell us a bit about your book. What kind of role did it play in your life?
Sure. Yeah, so if people aren't aware, the book is actually a project. I was trying to go back and find the date. I think you could consider that I was even working on it all the way back to 2006 in terms of when I started preparing the material to teach a class at NYU. Not to make this too long of a story, but I started teaching at NYU in 2004. So that's about 20 years ago now. And I had been a student here. And I had taken a few different classes. Then the introduction and the acknowledgments of the book, I talk about these different classes, but I had taken some classes around doing physics simulation. I had taken a class on generative art algorithms. And all these classes I took without processing. So I don't remember, I think I was trying to make things either in Macromedia Director with the Lingo programming language. I was also using just straight Java at the time, as well as C++. Danny Rosen, who some people might be familiar with, he makes these beautiful physical mirrors. I remember I took a class from him called The World, Pixel by Pixel. And we did everything in C++ in that class. Anyway, so I was looking for something to propose a class for, and I had just been started teaching beginner programming with processing. And I had always been a little bit of a math lover, amateur interest in math and physics. And so it just sort of like the pieces fit well to me to be able to say like, okay, I love these topics from math and physics. They're somewhat scary, intimidating, somewhat impenetrable. I can actually learn them through the act of trying to make the algorithms appear in processing. So often I would pick something like, oh, look at this formula for how friction works. I don't really understand it. And all the symbols and all the details, but maybe if I just try like slowly coding it, that'll be a way for me to wrap my brain around it. So that's kind of where I started. And then over time, I had taught this class. I had put together some written tutorials for it and ended up doing a version of the book on Kickstarter. So that version, so that was like a self-published book with all processing, starting with vectors and object-oriented programming, as you mentioned, going through physics simulation, fractals, cellular automata, a few different generative algorithms, genetic algorithms, and neural networks. So that was the whole book, 2012. So that was very exciting for me. I was like a big project. It was challenging to do it on Kickstarter. And so when I had published that book, I actually had used a system. There was a lot of different people that contributed to it, but in particular, I was working with Rune Madsen, who I know you know from PCD Copenhagen and other work, and Steve Kleiss, who is also a student and alumni here at ITP. And they developed something called the Magic Book Project. And the idea was I wanted to have a website with the book, all for free. And I wanted to have a print version of the book that I did self-published, print on demand. So the system that they developed that I collaborated on, the idea was we could write the book just as markdown files. And it would I think it was actually written in like Ruby at the time. I don't know about these details right. It would both generate a PDF using CSS paged media and this system called Prints.xml, as well as like push the stuff to HTML. So, because one of the things I had always been struggling with, and I don't know if, I often would have a tutorial that I wrote, in Microsoft Word, maybe in olden times, and then I wanted it to go on the processing website, so I had to convert it into HTML, and then maybe I wanted to put it in this WordPress, so I had to then like, oh, there's this other like WYSIWYG editor, and so I was always converting things back and forth between formats, and it was just very tedious and frustrating. So this project was the solution for that. And the reason I'm getting, and the whole thing about it that I was excited about was that once it's done, it's print on demand. It's a website. I can update it and fix it and change it like every day, every week.
Oh my God.
And
so that means
guess how often I did that.
Oh my God. That means like the printed version of this book, that's what I didn't notice, but it's always up to date. That was always up to date.
So this was the dream. I'm sorry. The problem is like once I had finished it, it just kind of like life gets in the way and other projects take over. Sure, maybe I had fixed a few things here and there, but I didn't follow through on that dream. It still was fantastic as a build process for the book, but the book it was just always in the back of my mind of, oh, I want to rewrite this chapter. Oh, this new thing. Oh, I learned because I was continuing to teach the class and I realized like, oh, these examples, they confuse students in this way. And I had new ones. I want to fix the book up. So that had just been piling up over the years. Lauren McCarthy started the P5JS project. And I had been porting the examples to P5. I started working on this machine learning library called ML5. I had developed new ideas about different examples. I had made video tutorials. So it just was time, really 10 years later, to do instead. So in the end, the incremental updates never happened, but what this new version, the one sitting back over there, is a major overhaul. So in a way, it's not really true, but it feels like to me like it's a brand new book. And some of that is also because I used an updated version of the Magic Book Project. It's all Node.js based now. I worked with an ITP alum named Jason Gao and another alum named Tuan Huang who did a lot of the design. So there's a whole new website. P5 allows all the examples to be interactive on the website in a different and more robust way. I have a brand new chapter added to it, rewritten a lot of different chapters, everything updated. We can get some of these details if you're interested. But so that's kind of where it is. But just to circle back to where you started, I do think so. The book is not. I'm trying to think of the best way to say this. it's my goal, and I believe that the book is beginner friendly, but it
Mm-hmm.
is not a beginner book.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe you're realizing that, oh, for this kind of piece of art that I want to make, or this type of typography experiment I want to do, or this type of interactive game, I need to go back and look at trigonometry. So the book is meant to be a very friendly, accessible, approachable beginner's guide to these
Mm-hmm.
more sophisticated
Yeah.
algorithms and mathematical topics that come once you've learned the basics.
Exactly. That's how I perceive it as well. Like, I think I remember going into the forces chapter, and I actually had some difficulties because I'm actually very bad in math. I've always been bad in math. In school, I had a big like problems there. So that was something I was struggling with, but I loved it. Really, I really loved it. And I was actually like playing around with all the examples, of course. But I still have my issues when I have to write a force, for example, apply it to an object. It's something that I'm not focusing on. I think my curriculum more covers this thing that is more below that, right? So, but
Yes.
I definitely recommend it to anyone because it's such a fantastic, yeah, it's just narrowed down to these few hundred pages,
Yeah.
and it's beautiful. It's just a beautiful, yeah, it's a great item to as a, for every creative coder. Everybody should buy it. So please buy the
Well,
book.
I'm thrilled if people do, but here's the thing. You also can read the whole thing online for free.
Yeah,
So, and that to
that's
me
amazing,
is,
man.
that makes me just as happy as somebody buying it. Of course, buying it helps, support various things and the whole system of all the work that I do. But in my mind, it's really important. I also, notice I'm sitting here at NYU, so I have the luxury of being able to work on a lot of things that are open education model, which is
Hmm.
it's always been very
Hmm.
important to me. NYU is a very inaccessible place in terms of its location, its admissions, and the largest piece, its expense.
Yeah, of course.
Extreme levels of tuition to come here. And so for me, it feels, if I'm going to choose to work here, which ultimately I do, it feels
Hmm.
important to me to be able to do whatever I can to export the knowledge and work that I do in a way that's accessible to a wider audience.
Hmm.
Um, so that's sort of part of the ecosystem of the things that I'm developing.
I think that's amazing. That's really honorable, and yeah, it's fantastic. That's super nice. And the new website, by the way, looks amazing as well. I love it. It's really cool. Such a great update. It's
Yeah,
so nice.
yeah, and little teasers. I'm drop news about the website. It's not actually. I haven't merged this pull request yet. But Jason, one of the things in the book are these fill in the blank exercises, which is something that I've always done. I don't know if anybody actually goes into the book and tries to write in the answer. It's like a prompt of like, hey, here's try to update the algorithm to do this one more step, and
Hmm.
then in the you'll see these like the skeleton of the code with blanks in it. But
Hmm.
on the website now, it shows it as blanks, and you can click a button to reveal the answer. I didn't merge this yet, but by the time this comes out, that'll be a
Wow.
feature on the website.
Oh
So
my
anybody
God, that's
go check
amazing.
that out. I'm curious if people like that.
Yeah, that sounds amazing then. Super nice. Great. Maybe we can zoom out a little bit and
Sure.
speak about creative coding. That's something I would love to discuss with you. So I would like to know what that means to you, like how much also you identify with this term, and what kind of role it could play in education in general.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting. This is a great question, actually. I've really loved the way that the term has come into the zeitgeist, and it's a
Hmm.
sort of common term that people understand. I liken it, I think it was Jer Thorpe who might have said this to me once originally. I liken it to the way people talk about creative writing.
Yeah.
And I think at the beginning, when people would use the term creative coding, I remember having this discussion. There was this question, well, isn't all coding creative, or is this
Yeah.
pigeonholing what we're doing into a certain box, or sort of saying that if you work, in industry, it's not creative? And I believe that all coding is creative, and
Absolutely.
but I do think it's this nice term that can help codify, pun intended, I guess, um, a certain community and a certain way of working. And for me, it boils down to the idea that when I'm, in giant air quotes now, creative coding, I am writing code that I don't know where it's going necessarily. And again, this is not the only way to think about creative coding, and I'm not trying to say I'm defining creative coding. I'm just saying for me, this is a key difference. And it's something that I try to infuse in all of the educational materials that I produce. This idea that that you don't have to be working on a software project with a known answer to make a piece of, let's just say, art, for example, with code. You don't have to write your spec sheet that is, this is the artwork, this is exactly what it's going to do, and now I'm going to implement it. It can be this exploratory process of experimentation and play.
This is the definition by Mitchell and Bown, I think. I love this one.
Okay.
I think creative coding is a process of exploration, iteration, reflection, discovery, and so on. I love this. I think taking out the result from the definition is great, because if you look it up on Wikipedia, it's very frustrating. They say it's like for building games and making things for advertisement and stuff. So I think this Wikipedia definition has to be changed at some point. But yeah, I love that. That's great.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, I think I think it can be viewed, and which is not which is also accurate in a way, as making media with code. So and that's actually one of the the beginner class we have here at NYU is called Introduction to Computational Media, because it's the idea of, I'm going to make sound, images, text, video, but the origins of that is code. It's algorithms generating that. I do think that also, but to me, that's computational media. That's different than creative coding.
All right. It makes sense. Yeah, sure. Well, I like to emphasize that it's all about the process, because the results for me, even though my students mostly want to create results because they are designers, and I think, there are some weird things going on right now. I think social media made it very, and also, easily accessible tools made it very easy to create an online identity, be a star designer on Instagram or something like this. And I feel like even though many of my students would not really admit this, but there's something like a force that puts them into this way of thinking, and that's why I always try to emphasize, like, hey, it's all about the process. It's, you learn really valuable things. And I think the most important thing for me is also the confrontation with computers as entities. You confront yourself with the inner workings instead of just looking on a surface that is built to, I don't know, be very accessible and very easy to use. But
right. I also think this relates to, and I mean, I don't mean to veer too far off course here, because this is a whole other can of worms and topic, but I do think so many questions now around this idea of language models and code assistants. There's something to me fundamental about the process of creative coding, which isn't to say that it isn't interesting to experiment with all these new technologies and there's new possibilities there, but there's something about creative coding to me that also is a slowness. So of like taking your time and like experimenting, as opposed to, like, for example, just to like take a, if I put into a prompt into some language model, please write the code for a particle system. Sure, I'll get there instantly.
Yeah.
But there's something about the process of building it up and trying that could lead you in directions that you couldn't have imagined if you just got there instantly. So that's somehow fundamental to me, to like this concept of creative coding as well. That process. That said, I mean, I was joking when I worked on this very silly project called ShiftBot, but we were joking about this idea of like, what is it that I do? I do artisanal handcrafted code, and there's something about that is really lovely and important still. And because I really do enjoy the act of writing the code and thinking it through. Like, why would I want to lose that per se?
Exactly. You answer one of the most important questions of this interview. Amazing. Yeah, exactly. That's the same. I'm a curator of the Demo Festival. The Demo Festival is a motion design festival organized by Studio Dumber and Dept, which is a huge agency network. And I was in Rotterdam now. We were there for the curational meeting. And there was something really interesting happening, because I was expecting, I was really curious about how do people now react to these AI aesthetics that have been emerging in the last years? Because I'm super critical about this. I think, it's people seem to think that this is the solution for everything now. But the interesting thing that I've experienced is that even in that context, I mean, it's an agency, and well, there were a few, we were as artists and designers there. But as soon as there was something that smelled like AI, everybody was like, no, let's not take this. This is terrible. It's very interesting. I expected the opposite. I was expecting that, tech demos with a lot of AI just get a lot of attention. But the things that were clear and that were still tangible and understandable were those that got the most points. And that is a little bit like a relief for me, honestly, because
Yeah, I have so many thoughts about this. Not intelligent, not necessarily intelligent or well-formed one. And my mind changes every day. But it is interesting that you say this. I just had a book release party at a place called Wonderville. And if people want, we could link to it. There's a video archive of the entire, it was like hours and hours long, because there are all these different live coding performances, which were fantastic. But as the opening to the performance, I made this little parody, like, I don't know if people have heard about, there's a company called Cognition, which released something called Devon, which is, the quote unquote world's first autonomous software engineer. So it's like, and there's a lot of fancy videos or promotional videos about it's like, an AI software engineer. Anyway, that aside, I made a parody of that, which was the world's first autonomous creative coder. And it was me, and I had some like silly animations and all this stuff. But what was fun about it is like the audience sort of spontaneously, like when I would say, and now artificial intelligence, boo. And so it was like this fun, like just, I mean, it was in jest and it was just sort of for fun, but it was interesting also. So I do think, I agree. Like, I think we all inherently understand that there is something, fundamental to the way that we create and communicate that is human, and we don't want to lose that. Which I would say, like, to be nuanced about this, that doesn't mean that tools that are powered by machine learning models and training data are not valuable and interesting and could lead to new exciting possibilities. It's just a matter of kind of like finding the right balance and not losing our own humanity. And I'm not some purist. Like, I'm like personally like somewhat addicted to using Copilot now when I'm in Visual Studio Code.
Yeah, I use it too. Like, I use it also for web development.
Yeah, and I think there's sort of two things here. One is there's the question around the training data for these models. So I think, like, what does it mean for all of this? Let's just take, it's very complicated in the world of image generation and video generation, but just talking about code, for example, what does it mean for a large company to basically scrape all of GitHub, which potentially is all properly licensed? Maybe a company doing this is only scraping code that's under, let's say, MIT license, and they're doing this all kind of like, legally. But where's the gray area in terms of, all this code that's being consumed and then being used to make something new, but we've lost the ability to cite the original source? So to me, that's one big question that I wrestle with and I'm uncertain about. Actually, I have I don't want to go too far off, but there are some interesting research projects going on about attribution, all that kind of thing. So that to me is a big question. And then the other side of that is, well, let's say we could solve that question. What does it mean? What does it mean to be sort of like taking away, to be changing our process? Are we losing something? Are we gaining something? Well, how does that affect creativity? How does that affect learning? How does that affect collaboration between humans? All of those things.
Yeah, I think, it's a really big topic. And I also have to say, like, my mind changes all the time about this. Currently, I'm reading Harari's new book, Nexus, which is...
Yes, it's on my list.
It's on your list. I just started 3 days ago. I'm quite far already. I love this. He's really brilliant. Honestly, like, he's really brilliant. Quite kind of doomsday scenarios that he puts out there with about AI. But I don't know. I'm also, well, I try to emphasize the thinking part of creative coding so much. I try to keep out the topic of AI for now from my platform, because I feel like, well, there's already so much out there. People that are really interested in this can make their courses somewhere else, but I want to really pinpoint these small things like functions, variables, loops, conditional statements. Like, how do you build this pattern and this little system that that where these little things interconnect with each other, and that's something that interests me more than this higher level technologies right now. I also had another question in mind, also zooming out again a bit, because I think it's really interesting to speak about maybe, do you think creative coding, well, I think John Maeda once said this, like we need to transform STEM into STEAM. We have to put art into what is it again? Like STEAM is science, technology, engineering, art, and mathematics, right?
Yes.
So how do you think can we get there? From my point of view, from a European perspective, I think we are totally behind in Europe, especially because like in terms of learning how technologies work, there's still such a barrier. People seem to be very scared of technology, like learning to code still seems to be something that is connected to the nerds, to people that are not really, that's something that's very different in the US, which I really like. So
yeah, I'm probably in too much of a bubble to have a good perspective, because it does feel like being at a space in this program at NYU, for example, we're just, all STEAM all the time. And I also have a lot of contacts through the Processing Foundation and other work that I've done who are in K through 12 education, who are really innovating and doing exciting things with teaching about code through art and art through code. So I do see a lot of that. To me, I think the thing that I think about and the thing that feels important to me is that, and I think I said this recently in a different, another interview or another context, but it's not that everyone needs to learn how to code, but everyone should have the opportunity to learn to code.
Yeah.
And I do think it is important in terms of literacy, like computational literacy is a sort of necessary skill as being a citizen of our world. So there shouldn't be any gatekeeping there. And for me, creative coding, or kind of like the idea of an art angle for learning to code, is a way in for a lot of people.
Yes,
that is more comfortable and friendly and exciting. So I don't necessarily think like, okay, all of STEM needs to be STEAM. Like, I mean, we do need people to be like proper engineers so that, the bridges don't fall down. And I do think there's a lot of people, and I was kind of a kid like this as well, love the sort of science of science for science's sake, and want to like solve theoretical math problems. And, so it's, I don't know that we need to overload or sort of put pressure on people who are learning about computer science and math, and you also need to like think of what you're doing as art, because that can also be that can have a lot of weight to it. But But for me, it is absolutely true, or my experience over so many years, that that people will say, I didn't get it. I didn't understand why math could be useful for me, or why I might want to learn about coding. But then I saw this creative coding example, or I realized I encountered the P5JS community, or continue. There's so many different examples of that. And then I realized like I could be included. There's a place for me. I could learn this too. And to me, that is the fundamental value. So, and I think also like games are a really good entry point as well. So like for me, especially in working with doing some workshops, I haven't done a lot of this, but I've done workshops teaching here in the US, anywhere like 6th grade all the way up through high school. And whenever I do like a beginner P5 kind of workshop, inevitably there's a population that's just trying to make a P5 sketch that's like a reproduction of one of their favorite games. So that also is you just have to find like, for me, coding, and this is also maybe a good definition for creative coding. So creative coding, or what you have to do is like, what everybody has a passion, or or is seeking a passion, and how can understanding computation, logic, rules, coding be something in service of that passion, whether it's dance, art, biology, journalism, writing, or possibly computer science.
That's beautiful. Like you mean like creative coding can be something that of course, that exists in the intersections of other areas, right? And That's something that I found, like my connection with creative coding. The first one was I was an electronic musician who was trying to build a live show, which is completely improvised, just with hardware, without a laptop. And then I met my friend Patrick Hübner, who created a live show with that. I mean, we bought this book, Generative Gestaltung, and we went crazy with that. So we had this projector projecting onto us, and that was amazing. Like, it was super, super nice. But my entry actually was through music. Before I was focusing 100% on producing and performing electronic music. And yeah, that's very, very interesting. Now, I mean, people use that as well for data visualization and to enhance their writing and stuff. I love that. I think it's so much, I learned so much from people that have nothing to do with the things that I've been exploring before. That's the most beautiful thing also about the community. I love that people come together on the internet and in physical space. And I think the best contacts in the last 10 years I made through the creative coding community. It's just fantastic.
And this idea, I mean, this is very new to me. I feel like an old fogey here, but this being able to see the performers at the Nature of Code book release party do these live coding performances. I mean, that I don't think I could have imagined that 10 years ago, or 15 years ago, 20 years ago when I was starting to work on this stuff. For me, live coding is the thing that I do on YouTube, where I'm like, can I make the wave function collapse algorithm work? But this was like highly engaging, exciting, interesting performance. And I mean, it was just the epitome to me of this idea of creative coding and infusing something like, I don't know what everyone who's performing as a live coder, what their origins are. But to me, it was like this idea of, oh, maybe they were a musician, a DJ, their passion is performing with music in an audience in a club or some other kind of venue. And they're able to apply coding and computation to that in this totally new way. And that to me was, so what other fields like that, have yet to be explored fully. So to me, that is, in many ways, the essence of what gets me excited to see, hopefully if people are, going on that path just from some of my tutorials and other things.
I mean, I think it would be amazing if there on your website, there would be a section. I mean, I do this sometimes, like doing interviews about projects with people. So that's so nice, because some people connect ideas that I never thought about before and create amazing stuff. And I think that would be really nice for the Nature of Code as well, like to see how people use your content to make their projects,
Yeah, so I have for the Coding Train, which is the YouTube channel, for that website, which is also kind of newish, speaking of Rune, but I worked with Design Systems International, which is a company started by Rune Matson and Martine Bravo.
Yeah, I know.
So they built the new Coding Train website, and this was really key to me. So YouTube, which is a platform that has completely shaped my work in so many ways. I've never done with that, it is probably the single biggest reason I've been able to reach a larger global audience, people outside of NYU. But one of the things that YouTube as a platform doesn't do is what you're talking about, which is to say it doesn't have an easy way or a lot of like hooks in for somebody to be like, I watched this video, now I took it and did this with it, and I want to share back this creative project I made and sort of like see where to draw all those lines between different things. So anyway, so for the website we built this thing called a passenger showcase, where people can submit creative projects that they made based on a particular video. And when you go to the videos page, you see here's the video tutorial, here's the code examples, a list of like other references, and then all of these other projects that people made. So I hadn't really thought about how to do that. I love this idea of maybe doing that with the Nature of Code. I mean, it does to some extent happen organically on social media now. It's really fun, kind of, all of this is fraught and complicated as well. Like, how much do I want to be spending my time, like, scrolling on these different feeds? But it is, I've started trying to experiment with Instagram a little bit more. And that to me is a thrill to see, people will post a reel of some interesting computational design they made, and they'll tag me and say, like, based on chapter 4 or whatever. And like, to me, like that, those moments are my favorite reasons to be on the internet. So
same for me. Yeah, of course. I understand this very well. Well, I was just scrolling on your website just a few moments ago, and while you were speaking, and I just thought what I would love to see on this showcase page is maybe a little bit of background about the person who did it. You know, what kind of person is it? Like, what is the why behind this idea?
Yeah.
That would be really inspiring. I think that also could like inspire quite a few people. But it's also a lot of work, actually. I do this since quite some time, and you know, it's really a lot of work. I really enjoy this, but it became a fundamental part of my work, like doing interviews like this one with you now, and yeah, asking students like if they want to show their work, and like writing a text about it and answering questions, and yeah.
Yeah, so this is great. Like, so the show, I haven't really followed through on all of the dreams of the showcase. I mean, the feature on the website is a very lightweight way for somebody just to fill out a quick form, link to a P5 sketch, put a thumbnail image in, and then their thing is there. So the one nice thing about it is somebody can submit something, you know, in, I would say if to make the thing, but if assuming they've made it, like it takes less than a minute to submit it. It's also hooked into GitHub, so it's a little bit of an entry point. You don't have to, but it makes the form on the website auto creates a pull request. So it's also one of the reasons why I did it this way, was like trying to give people a way of stepping into and learning a little bit more about Git and GitHub, which also can be very intimidating. But you're right. Like, one of the things was, one of my intentions with the showcase was to also then look at the showcase on live streams, so that I could be like, and Raphael de Courville, who does weekly Twitch streams, does a really amazing job of doing this. Like, he has a weekly coding challenge, and he has a stream where he'll review them, and it's super fun and very like, it's a really nice community. So I had sort of hoped to do something a bit more like that. Like, I would release a new video, people submit to the showcase, and then I would go live and I would look through them and talk about them and maybe dig into it a bit more. I did do some of that on Instagram. Actually did a series of like featuring different showcase projects a bit more on Instagram. So I think you're right. Like, the community aspect is so fundamental. But what I haven't thought about, which is what you're getting at, is it could be interesting to think about ways to you know, just to do even more community interaction, or feature people in their body of work more. So I have to think about that, but I love this idea.
I mean, it even could be something like a form that people fill out. The problem with that is that you cannot really react to their answers. So that means like the interview is staying a little bit like on a surface level.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think this became like, people told me that this is one of the fundamental features of my project, that I show the faces behind, or some of the faces behind. Like, I'm struggling a lot with finding people that are not just from Europe. This is something that I've just realized. I'm trying to get more interviewees from other continents, which is something that I find super interesting. Like, how do people use creative coding in Africa, for example?
Yes.
Like, you know, what kind of tools do they use? Like, what kind of aesthetics do they resonate with? And what kind of people are these? You know, this is something I would love to go deeper into. And I'm on this journey now to find out how that works.
Well, we can circle back. I have, like, just as you were talking, I was like, I thought of a few people that I could connect you with in other parts of the world that are maybe less obvious, less traditional. And most of these names are people that I've either that are floating in my head, or some of them are certainly through the NYU community. We have a huge international student population here, but also the Processing Foundation, I think, especially if you look at the new board of directors for the Processing Foundation, and a lot of the new people have gotten involved in recent, just in the last year or two, there is a strong intentionality towards diversity, but in particular reaching the global audience of the processing and P5JS communities, which I think is really important. And I relate to this a lot, because I mentioned earlier, I often feel very much in a bubble. New York, ITP at NYU is a bubble. New York is a bubble. The US is a bubble. I'm like inside of a bubble, inside of a bubble, inside of a bubble. So
this is the thing.
It's nice to be able to me, it's been, the YouTube work has been especially special, because it is a way that I've been able to connect and hear from people from all different backgrounds and parts of the world, with different levels of experience and resources, and hear about their their story and their life experience, and it really informs and changes the way that I think about how to communicate and make my materials more accessible to a wider audience.
Yeah, one story that just pops up in my mind, it was, I think, 2 years ago when I was also in Rotterdam for curating the demo festival. I made an Instagram story like, hey, I'm in Rotterdam. Is anybody there who wants to hang out? And then there was somebody writing me. His name is Omid Nemal Habib. He's from Tehran, now living in Rotterdam. He's a really great graphic designer, creating amazing, like quite contemporary graphic design, but always with influence from the like Islamic and Oriental culture, which is amazing. Like he does a lot with calligraphy. And in this meeting, we had a fantastic day, spent like, I don't know, 5 hours and having coffee and eating together and stuff. And then he said, like, I want to learn processing. I think I want to learn it. Like, can you send, how to do it? I gave him like credentials for the website. And what happened then was magic, because he was actually using calligraphy, combining it with ASCII, and created something so unique. I never saw something like this before.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh my God, that was like a culture clash in a positive way. Like this guy just became, I don't know, this inspired me so much. I made an interview with him. I will send it later to you and also link it in this blog post here. That was heartwarming, and these are the moments when I feel like, okay, that's why I do it. That's why I love doing it. It's so nice.
Yeah, sometimes I love to, I try not to obsess too much over my YouTube analytics, but I have a lot of fun going into the geography, and I just try to see like, oh, look there's people watching in this country in this part of the world, and I'm trying to see like, and that to me is always really just so exciting and fun.
Awesome, that's great. Cool. I have one more question in mind. I guess most people have something like a bucket list, things they want to do in their life. Is there something that you have on your list where you feel like, okay, that's something I'm going to do? Like in the best case, it's a secret that you reveal in this video.
Wow, this is crazy. The funny thing is, like, I don't know. I don't have a good answer for this. Like, that's like, oh, this is the thing. I feel like a lot of my things have nothing to do with creative coding. So, what's interesting about, I would say, like, the thing that's where my mind goes is like, as much as we're talking about how I was like, which is all true, I was like a math nerd growing up. I don't know, math nerds, right? I loved math. I majored in math in college. I've discovered coding through this program, and so this sort of like math, science, coding thing for me is like such a fundamental part of my personality. However, what I actually really loved when I was growing up was and is musical theater. I was in plays in high school and college, and I was always going to shows on Broadway if I could. And I'm not saying I was like had any talent for this stuff. So I guess my bucket list thing is like, I've often thought about to produce. I mean, I don't know if I have the ability to do this, but to write or participate or produce some kind of Broadway musical that is all about, like, I don't know, the computer, like the people inside the computer. I don't know, Tron the musical, Code the musical. So that's my thing that I probably should. The problem, that I try to make some space for.
That sounds amazing.
I was gonna say I did check something off my list, which is, I mean, it wasn't on my list till I did it, but really, so like things that are in the theater and performing world, I'm really interested. I think this is why I kind of ended up doing the YouTube thing. It's kind of like letting me inhabit both of these spaces a little bit. So I am kind of doing this in a way. I've discovered it through lots of accidental, paths. But Matt Parker, who runs a YouTube channel called Stand Up Maths. And he's a British comedian.
I know him.
This incredible book that just came out called Love Triangle. Anyway, he's one of my personal idols. I always was watching him on YouTube, and he's like the epitome of somebody who's who's really entertaining and funny, and like a talented performer who also like can explain stuff in math. So anyway, he to me is And he runs a show called An Evening of Unnecessary Detail. It's called. It's like a comedy night that he's been doing in the UK for a while, and he did a couple shows in New York, and I got to perform in them. I really like somebody. If anybody happened to be at one of those, who's watching those, you could just give me. I need somebody to give me an anonymous note to tell me honestly how I did. But to me, that was like I did like a 10-minute, little set. Like I did. Some live coding on an Apple II Plus for one, and I did this like AI parody thing that I was talking about for another. So to me, that was kind of like, it was terrifying, and I kind of like, I stressed out about it for like a month, so I don't know if it was good for my health or sanity, but like to me, that was like this idea of being able to find new pathways to, like, these weren't tutorials, but hopefully they were entertaining and inspiring and help people to think about coding and computation in a different way, and maybe somebody that would learn. So to me, that is, it's not an exact answer to your question, but I would like to do more opportunities like that.
That's amazing.
Yes.
Yeah, actually, this is not, I feel quite the same because I'm a musician. I was playing a lot live. I had bands and I love being on stage. I really like it. I love giving talks as well. So I think that's also one of the reasons why I do it, just like you, just also being in front of a camera and speaking about coding, which is cool. And this reminded me also to another community member, Nicolas. He is now he started learning creative coding before he was a creative director for fashion brands, and now he's creating a theater piece. He loves ballet, and now he's creating kind of a creative coding show. It's about the birth of technology, the birth and the death of technology. Like, it's kind of a really, really creative project where he's writing the music. Like, the concept comes from him. He's coding the visuals for the whole show, which is really cool. Yeah, I will share it with you when it's done.
Yeah, yes, I would love to check that out. That sounds amazing.
Great. Cool. All right. I think, we touched on so many interesting topics. I really enjoyed this so far. Is there anything else you would like to say or ask or whatever? Is there something you would like to, few last words?
Well, first, I just want to say thank you to you. First of all the work that you do is wonderful. I've enjoyed following it so much. And I particularly think like this angle of really focusing in on material that's designed for graphic designers, and like that's a really wonderful body of work that you've created, and I really enjoyed having this conversation. I guess not to be plugging the book, but I would love to give people at least like a discount code. So if you're wanting to buy, so there we can make it up right now. You can order the book direct from natureofcode.com as well as from No Starch Press. So we can put both of the links to that, and I'm able to create discount codes. No Starch can create one for their direct sales. I can create one for my direct sales. The issue is, don't buy it from me if you're like in Europe. The shipping's going to be off the charts. I mean,
I still don't have mine, by the way. It's still on the way.
Okay. So what's a good discount code for your community?
That's a great question. Well, I call it often TRCC for Tim Rodenbrücker Creative Coding. Maybe that's something. I mean, that's
TRCC. Okay, we'll do that.
Amazing.
25% off with TRCC.
Wow.
But I don't want to end with the sales pitch. So I'll just say, I would love for anybody who's watching this or enjoying the book, if you're making something creative based on any of my tutorials, the book, please share them with me. We talked about this earlier, but that's the thing that I love to see the most. You can find me on the various social medias in the ways that you might imagine. But so that would be that's my final parting request from the audience. I love to hear from people who are making creative stuff with code.
Awesome. I can say this is valid for me as well. Sounds makes a lot of sense. Maybe one last question from my side. I'm thinking about creating a course on object-oriented programming. But I want to really stay like very, very low level. I know that you would probably say that the random walker is the best way to explain it in a simple way. Do you agree? Is that the best entry to explain explain object-oriented programming? Or
So there's two thoughts I have here. One is, yes, random walk is a great one. It's what I use in the Nature of Code books. So certainly you could look at that material and see how that resonates with you, or how you might want to take your own spin off it. I recently re-recorded, so the original beginner processing tutorial videos that I made, I recorded in 2012, I believe.
I know
And
it was in
just
Vimeo. You dropped this orange. I remember this.
Yes,
And the pen.
exactly. Yes. And then I recently, just last year or a year and a half ago now, I made a whole new, it's on YouTube. It's like 5 hours long. It's one single long video. It's a whole beginner's
Wow.
learning
Yeah, I
code from
know that.
scratch at processing. So anyway, the reason why I bring that up is that includes a section on object-oriented programming for the beginner, and what I tend to use, it's also related to the Nature of Code book, but this idea of a particle system, I think, is a good entry point for object-oriented programming. And I don't mean particle system in the advanced, like physics, it's modeling physics way. I just mean this idea of there's a single dot. And so what I use is bubbles. There could be something, especially if some of your audience is coming from, let's say they're very experienced with working with tools like Illustrator. I'm sure there are other tools that aren't made by large companies like Adobe, but essentially like SVGs, this concept of a design being built out of vectors, maybe that would translate in some way to, it doesn't.
No. Unfortunately not. The problem is there's a big confusion, because from my point of view, a vector, like a vector file, is something completely different than a p-vector object. And there was something I was confused myself about. And I just realized, while you were talking about this, I just realized, yes, that was one of the reasons why I was a little bit maybe overwhelmed. I mean, I was always focusing on teaching. That means I didn't focus on becoming a super good to master all the physics and stuff. So for me, always the question is like, can I explain what I'm doing here?
I also agree with you in that, like in the context of, I'm thinking about like wanting to make, let's say like what somebody wants to do is make a design for like a movie poster or show poster or a book cover, but through computational design, and they're learning about for loops and colors and shapes and different algorithms. Like, there's no reason to add object-oriented programming to that inherently. There's so much to learn and play with just from this idea of learning to code and the basics of computational design. I think when object-oriented programming, and a lot of people don't even like object-oriented programming at all, but like for me, where it really becomes important is for, or helpful is for, honestly, like I was gonna say simulation and sort of like larger systems of like agents and bouncing balls and those kinds of things. There's different time and spaces and contexts for all the different things, but I think it makes sense. But I do think there is a way that there is for again, I'm not as intimately knowledgeable as your audience and practice as you are, but to me, it feels like there probably is a way to introduce object-oriented programming as a module. That's maybe there's a particular kind of project or example that you want to demonstrate that it really would be conducive for, and it could sort of come into play. And you could leave the vector stuff out of it. I mean, that's a whole other can of worms.
Exactly. And this is actually the challenge I see for my curriculum, is introducing this on a basic level, but explaining what the real benefit is. Because I think having a random walker is nice, but I mean, you know what? I think the best thing I can do is, as soon as people start to get excited about this, and maybe I do a basic course on this thing, I will send them to you, because of course, I mean, this is, I will build a channel between my platform and your platform, and I just lead the people to you and your teaching, which is,
well, that's, we all can't do it all. So it's what we need to be able to all make our things and find ways to send people back and forth. And also, as much as I know that a lot of people like the kind of chaotic, energetic style of my videos, sometimes it doesn't work for people, and they prefer something like a little milder from a different point of view. So I think a rising tide lifts all boats is the expression that I try to, the more we all do, the more options there are for people, and that's amazing.
Options end up in decision fatigue sometimes, right?
Yes, that's true.
Awesome. Dan, it was a pleasure to have you. Thank you so much for joining. And I'm looking forward to catch up at some point when there's a new book or whatever.
Yeah. Yes, and I hope
or you have your Broadway theater out there.
Yes,
right?
I can't believe it's sort of somehow like it feels like to me like we must have met in person at one time or another, but we haven't. So we have to make that happen somewhere.
That would be amazing. I would be down.
Anytime you're passing through New York, definitely let me know. But I love traveling, so hopefully I'll make my way towards your neck of the woods sometime again soon.
Awesome. That sounds amazing. Let's do this then. Okay.
Wonderful.
I'm going to end the recording now. Bye, people. Thank you for joining, and see you.
Bye, everyone.